One of the techniques we've used over the years is dipping organic materials for their random quality to assemble into different objects. I'm using these oak leaves right here and dipping it into the red wax, which if you remember is the harder wax. You're going to build up multiple coats on this, just like if you ever did dip candles over a wick as a kid. We're doing essentially the same thing on these oak leaves. Each of these you've got to hold until the shell starts to dry. And then as it dries, you can build up thicker and thicker coats until we get to the desired thickness, which is always going to be a minimum of 1/8 of an inch. So once we've got these shells, as you can see, you've got a whole variety of different random objects which start to depart from what they actually are, but they have, references and other ideas. These can all be combined into a single piece or a larger piece, and we do that generally using the glue wax. So if we want to start joining these together for any particular reason, we're going to use some of our glue wax that we talked about previously and the soldering iron. The glue wax, or sticky wax as it's called, and you got to be careful not to burn yourself with this, but you can actually start to join pieces together. It's good to work outside, or we actually have a kitchen hood here because you really want to keep your head out of the fumes. And mind you, the wax is soft until it cools, so you've got to keep holding these things in position or have some sort of armature set up to keep it from moving while it cools. Get one more little spot here. Okay, so we'll let that cool, and we can move it in a minute or two. So if you're going to do a lot of this work, you're going to want to get a wax pot. This is actually just a small deep fryer. I like the kind that has the temperature control on it because in most cases your wax is melting between 200 and 250. You really never want to get anything higher than that because you do have the potential for a fire overheating. So on the cardboard, which we've sealed the ends of, we want to start coating the surface with wax to build up an even layer that we can then texture or tool. It's kind of important that your first coat of wax is a little bit hotter and it absorbs into the area. And just like dipping the leaves, you're going to wait for this to cool, and then you can build up other surfaces. This other side I did a few minutes ago, and you can see we're starting to lose the cardboard area. You can start to turn down the temperature on your wax, but you can begin to kind of dab it on to build up a surface more quickly. Now I want to remind you that as opposed to fabricating something, the only reason we're doing this is because we actually want to work with a very textured surface. And there's many, many ways to apply the texture. So we'll wait for that to cool. In a lot of cases, if you want to move more quickly building up a surface, I keep a little block of silicone around and try to ladle out some of the wax. This way you can have a little bit that'll work more like a paste and it'll cool faster. So we'll let that chill for just a minute or two. And as it does, you can start to pick parts of it up with your putty knife or anything else. And it's kind of like, at this point, a lot just like frosting a cake. So you can apply, what's hard is if you actually want to get an even or a smooth surface. And some of that we leave till some things come back from the foundry. But at any rate, you can tool into those various areas and build it up. Small objects such as this, it's very hard to get the tape to fill the edges, and if we're going to fill, we're probably going to fill something like this by hand. But we can actually go ahead and carefully, because we've got hot glue holding this thing together, so I'll be lucky if I can actually build this up enough before my glue turns loose. But a combination of brushing the wax on and building it up, you start to end up with a small object which is stable and can be cast by the foundry. And again, the reason for actually working over the cardboard is just that your wax isn't going to break. It's got a core, a reinforcing into it. The techniques that we talked about using with clay, can all be combined in any manner over this. As this cools, we can start to form this whole piece with our fingers or other tools into something much more organic than the plainer quality that it started with. So I've got this. As it cools, you can begin to move it with your fingertips or some of your other tools. And your possibilities are quite endless in terms of what you form. In the investment process, it is possible to burn out solid wood. And again, it's a question of why would we be burning out wood as opposed to fabricating. For example, I might want to make a couple of drawer pulls, and these are joined together just for ease of having to deal with too many little pieces, because once cast, they can be cut apart. I've used wood glue on these scraps of plywood, and you want to bring up the same kind of base coating that we did on the other. And once you've actually, got your base coating, we can start to apply more a texture, but there's a lot of design is infinite in this. We're actually really just looking at techniques where you can end up with forms that you may use in terms of architectural details, fixtures, interior design, tabletop setting, etc. But you can see how once we start to texture cover this surface, we'll look in a little bit at other tooling and designs that can actually be worked into this. Okay, so we've used the sticky wax to assemble these pieces, and one of the things you want to do is cut down your finishing time coming back from the foundry on anything that you can. We also want to make sure that there's a connection between the pieces which is large enough for the metal to flow, because you got to remember that this is actually going to be a cavity inside of the investment. It will not be a solid, it will be an open negative space that we're pouring a liquid into. So right here, I may want to smooth that up a little bit, and sometimes it's just a question of using a different temperature wax, puttying a little bit of it in, melting it with your soldering iron. Just trying to do a little bit of smooth up on that surface and anything else. The other thing, as these have cooled, that we can also do is, if you wanted to bring back in the structure of these leaves, either using a carving tool or your soldering iron, you can actually start to tool in shapes, more lines. Whatever's in the surface of the wax is actually going to be what you get. So your tooling can be quite infinite on this. Okay, so we've got this all firmed up, and you can clean it up as you're working on the table. It's good to kind of clean your fingers and stuff off periodically, because you start to get little chunks of wax from your fingertips embedding in pieces. On the little piece of cardboard that we were looking at a few minutes ago, just want to show how we can actually start to use that cardboard as an armature to build up three-dimensional shapes. And this is not, we're not looking for something which is perfectly geometric. If that's what you want, you should do it by 3D printing a CAD file. We're looking at the basis of something which is tending towards more organic, or is showing the qualities of hand. But there are definite geometric regularities in nature, and you can start to bring those in. You're really only limited by your hand skill as to what you can actually do. On the potential pull, I've built up enough material here that when this cools, we can actually start to, cut into it. press different pieces in, cut. It's a lot about experimenting with texture. If you've ever done any wood block printing or look at what wood tools will do, there's a whole variety, and it varies with the temperature of the wax, what you can actually do. We'll go take a quick look at our buildup for the cascade. Once this wax is hardened again, a lot of times we'll use our soldering iron and try to impart a texture to it. So much of Diego Giacometti's work was, you know, really just exposing the qualities of the wax in the hand. Anyway, you can experiment with all sorts of tools and textures as to what you develop.
Okay.
For texture, you can see this area is still cooling. That's cooled. Some of the surface I was starting to work. And at certain temperatures, you can still work things with your fingers. The heat of your fingers is actually lovely to work and smooth pieces along. And these.